Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. A little later in the program, we're going to take a look at the Ethics Commission that's looking at Governor Hickenlooper. But first, since fracking is on everybody's mind, let's find out what it is and some of the people who actually support it from the organization called CRED. Jon Haubert, glad to have you.
Thanks.
All right, you're with CRED.
Correct.
Got a little street cred there. What is CRED?
So Coloradans for Responsible Energy Development is a new public education effort, and it's aimed at helping Coloradans get the facts on fracking first before they make a decision.
Decision on what?
Well, lots of things are happening. We've got, folks talking about it at the kitchen table, talking about it at schools with their neighbors. In some cases, we're seeing ballot issues.
And that's probably the bigger concern. Mm-hmm. Last year, we saw 3 or 4 communities pass moratoriums on hydraulic fracturing, which is a lot of hype, and people are worried about it, and I think there's a lot of misinformation. I want to be really clear where you come from, though. This is an organization that is funded by those companies who do fracking.
Mm-hmm. Two of the largest Colorado independents, Anadarko Petroleum Corporation and Noble Energy, are 2 of the biggest independent operators in Colorado, and they are the ones who put the funding together for CRED, and the purpose behind it is to clear up some of that information. So those who are doing the practice, those who go out and frack these wells, are the ones who are the most capable of explaining and talking to the community about what it is that they're doing.
Step back for a second and tell me why recently there seems to be this panic over hydraulic fracturing. And I know about this technology. I'm not a geologist, but I know how it works. I know the stats. And once you do, you have a very different feeling of it. But talk about the panic behind this. And I've heard some really ridiculous stuff about fracking. Why the hysteria?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'd say it's hard to pinpoint exactly when it all of a sudden became very popular to talk about fracking. But we certainly saw, I think I would best describe it as this vacuum of misinformation and almost nothing but misinformation for about a couple of years, creeping up. And in many ways, the oil and gas industry in particular wasn't exactly countering that misinformation themselves.
That's very polite. Let me take another swipe at it. Your guys did nothing about this for years, and I think it's because most oil and gas guys, well, you're engineers, and engineers like to be right. But being right doesn't mean you win. It means you have the facts on your side. That doesn't mean you win. And only now it seems that the industry has realized, wait a second, some of the eco-left has really gotten some ground and could stop this very clean resource that is this great bridge fuel. It's clean burning. It's just amazing. We are the Saudi Arabia of natural gas in the United States. And now people are jumping against it. It's very odd.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think what we could talk about is there are several things happening all at the same time, and I think that there's been a lot of education done with policymakers, state or federal elected officials, regulators, even county commissioners or local elected officials are familiar with the process. They are fully aware of the capability and the benefits. For example, you have trade associations, policy groups, think tanks who do a lot of educating with those individuals. However, the general public has been largely left out of the conversation. And so we find ourselves, as we talk to Coloradans throughout the state, we need to start at the very basics with those folks.
You're playing catch up, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And why
with the general public.
Right. And why would anyone know what fracking is? It's a technology. It's a technology that's been around for 100 years. It's not new.
Not to the energy industry, it's not. Right. But it's not common knowledge to GOQ public. Why would it be, right?
All right. Let's break it down as simply as possible. I know we like oil and we like gas, and I know we get these things out of the ground. All right. I know that we poke holes in the ground, we run a tube down to where the oil and the gas is, and we suck it up and we use it to make gasoline and to heat our homes. All right. I get that part. What exactly is hydraulic fracturing? What is this technology in a nutshell? What's different about it?
Sure. So with fracking, what we're talking about is a very specific moment in time during the entire drilling and completions process, if you will. And fracking is often described just as that. It's a completions process. It's done near the end. So for example, if you see a a well or a derrick drilling, that's not exactly fracking. Though people drive by, they go up and down the highway and they say, oh, they're fracking, or they're clearing the land, they're fracking. That's not exactly accurate. So part of our job is to clear up that misinformation and say, this is what fracking is, and more importantly, all these other things are not related to fracking. So if we're going to have a conversation about this, if you're concerned about fracking, let's get to the basics. Let's do some education. Let's explain what it is. Right. There's another that's where another important component is the hydraulic fracture, or I'm sorry, the horizontal drilling. Of course, that's not as sexy or controversial of a term, so it doesn't get picked up on.
Let me put out and tell me how close I have it to accurate. Mm-hmm. That horizontal drilling is amazing new technology. Mm-hmm. It's almost like, the road runner. You would run in the air and then turn and go around. You can drill down. I mean, you can drill down a mile, mm-hmm. and you can make a left turn and go out someplace else, mm-hmm. and then you can drill down again, and you can move this drill around throughout the ground.
It's an
amazing technology.
Mm-hmm.
So you can poke a hole here, but be sucking up gasoline from how far away? I mean, almost a mile.
Oil or gas, not sucking up gasoline. But in other words, think of if you were to have your kitchen table, for example, and if we could poke one hole down the middle and drill sideways and get the resource that's underneath the entire table, but only impact the surface at that one point. That's really what this is about. And if you combine, in my opinion, between fracking and horizontal drilling, it's kind of like the peanut butter and the jelly finally get together, and you have this great combination.
You're poking fewer holes in the ground, and you're still
at
reaching
the surface level. Right. That's right. Yeah.
Hydraulic fracturing. Let me give you my layman's take on it. What happens is that natural gas, particularly, is inside the rocks.
And oil as well.
And oil, I mean, they're
trapped,
inseparable. Yeah, they're together. Mm-hmm. When you pull one, you get the other.
Yep, hard rock.
All right, so they're trapped inside. What you do is you send down water and sand and some chemicals, and mm-hmm. I want to talk about those mm-hmm. chemicals. Mm-hmm. They make it sound like you're sending toxic waste down there. And basically, you pump it through and you break up that rock. And when you break up that rock, you then take the water out and you take that water away. But by breaking up that rock, you open up where the oil and gas comes mm-hmm. into the pipe. So by doing that, we're able to reach oil and gas finds that we've never been able to do in the past.
That's correct. And in many areas, we've known that it's been there for a very long time. It just never made sense to produce it because we didn't have the technology to do so. With fracking, when we crack that rock, it's not exactly breaking it all apart, but it's small cracks all over the place throughout that formation.
You fracture
it.
You
that's right.
Use water
and sand to help keep those cracks open.
Less water, mm-hmm. fracture the mm-hmm. rock. How far down do you do this?
So typically it'll go at least a mile down, and many people are very concerned about their water, as we should be here in Colorado. Water is always a very sensitive topic. But when your water is around 300 to 500 feet below the surface, and you're going somewhere between 5, 6, 7, sometimes 10,000 feet, you've got impermeable rock separating the water and where we're fracking, not to mention several layers of cement and steel, cement and steel, cement and steel with our casing and the drill pipe to keep that area protected, to keep our water protected.
Let me talk about water for just a second. Mm-hmm. The big worry is, and rightfully so, that are we contaminating drinking water? Mm-hmm. That part of it has nothing to do with hydraulic fracturing, in that if we're poking a hole through the ground for just regular old-fashioned drilling, let's say, mm-hmm. before we use this technology called fracturing, we're still drilling well past the water table and going down. So it really, if you're concerned about contaminating the water supply, we should be worried about every hole ever poked, not just the ones that are fractured. And when you go through the water area, you have a case, you have the pipe, mm-hmm. but outside
steel
of that,
pipe. Mm-hmm.
outside of that, you have another steel pipe with cement in between, and then
multiple
another
layers.
Steel pipe with another cement in between. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that goes down for how many hundred feet?
Oh, it's going to depend on the formation and
but
the
hundreds
area.
and hundreds of feet.
And the important part too to take into consideration, I think, as well, is all of those steps happen in the beginning of the process before a well is fracked. For example, these brilliant engineers who have developed this technology are fully aware of the pressure. They're aware of the environment and the situation. Why would they ever frack a well if they thought it could contaminate the water, or they weren't going to get the oil and gas back up, which is actually their objective? Why would they sink millions?
That the water would seep into the gas.
Why would they sink millions of dollars or millions of gallons down a hole if they weren't positive it was going to produce? The days of, I would say, wildcatting of oil and gas exploration from a long time ago, where people would drill a hole hoping they would get oil and gas, don't really exist anymore. The technology, the seismic
nobody's prospecting
technology
anymore. You know what's down there. All right,
Yeah,
we're going to run out of time so quickly,
Sure.
but let me just kind of get a sense. So the water table is this, but you're drilling down over a mile below that. And as you go through the water table, you put in these safeguards of casing, that's pipe and cement, and then more casing, pipes, and more cement. And but let's talk about what people worry about, the fracking fluid. So you pump down water, sand, and some of these chemicals. What are these chemicals?
So it's going to be a mixture of chemicals that help the water and sand go down the pipe before it gets to that a lubricant in some cases. Often they're chemicals that you may have in your garage or under your kitchen sink. They are chemical additives. I don't want to pretend that they aren't chemical related, but there are things that are pretty common that when you hear the technical name and then you may have it explained, well, what do we also use that for?
You use it in your
soap,
dish soap,
detergent,
yeah,
exactly.
It's amazing
those types
you
of
wash
things.
your clothes in the same chemical that's there. But none of that can get out into the well water because of those casings that we talked about.
And it hasn't, right? And so the EPA has studied this issue, as they should, right? I mean, these types of government entities should be studying health impacts. COGCC here in Colorado, no one has found
COGCC.
Sorry, the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission,
Okay.
the state agency charged with overseeing oil and gas development.
What happens to the water after it's down? You suck it back up, don't you?
Pressure is going to bring it right back up, along with that oil and gas.
All right. What happens to it when you bring it back up? You got all this water and some chemical and sand.
And oil and gas eventually is going to come back up. So it goes through a treatment process where we can separate the water, send it one direction to recycle it, reprocess it. In some cases, they'll use that same water to frack the next well. And that makes sense from a business standpoint. Why would they want to discard this water they can use just to use more water? And then they'll separate the oil and the gas as well.
Right. So your job with CRED is try to get the public up to speed so they can make their own decisions about this.
Yeah.
People want to get information. Where do they go, and what will they learn when they get there?
So we highly recommend a microsite we created called studyfracking.com, where you can learn about the fracking process, but you can also learn about all of these studies that have been done, so that people, when they hear, well, it's an unregulated process, or maybe we should study it more, they can actually see hundreds of studies already done on this.
Running late, you guys put together a quick commercial. I want to show that commercial. Forgot all about it. But let's get this one out, because where else are you going to show it on public television?
Great. Thanks, John.
Here's the commercial from CRED.
Fracking has been part of Colorado for the past 60 years, so let's talk about it.
What's in fracking fluid?
How many wells have been fracked?
Why do we need it? I was in this commercial a while back, and I had tons of questions about fracking. So I spent time on the studyfracking.com site, and I found lots of good information about all my questions. I've recommended it to others, and I'll take this opportunity to recommend it to you.
All right. And to be clear, this is going to be one side of the argument, but certainly one worth learning so you can have the full discussion.
Absolutely.
Jon, thank you for being here. You stay tuned. You're going to love this next story.